Elias Morgan woke before sunrise, just like every day for the past 7 years. He dressed the same way he always did, dark gray suit, light blue shirt, silver tie, then drank the same black coffee he hardly tasted anymore. The morning felt normal, but he sensed something uneasy in the air, like a quiet warning he couldn't see. He ignored it, grabbed his folder, and left for Hale & Co., the place where he had poured nearly a decade of his life. The subway was crowded, but Elias barely noticed. His mind was already moving through tasks, reminding himself of everything he needed to solve today. 3 reports to finish, 1 client ready to explode, another waiting for reassurance, and the new intern who still didn't know how to send a proper email. Elias was tired, but he kept going. He always kept going. If he didn't, the whole department would fall apart. When he entered the glass lobby of the building, the receptionist gave him a strange, tight smile. Not friendly, not rude, just nervous. Elias nodded and stepped into the elevator. The ride to the 32nd floor felt longer than usual. His reflection in the mirrored wall looked tired, older than 34. Like someone worn down by trying to hold too many things together for too many years. The doors opened with a soft chime. The office was unusually quiet. People glanced at him, but quickly looked away. A few whispered to each other, and he felt the weight of every stare. Something was wrong, and the silence made it worse. He walked toward his desk, but before he reached it, someone blocked his path. Adrian Hale, the CEO's only son. The heir to everything. The man who had joined the company 6 months ago and already acted like he owned the air everyone breathed. Adrian stood with one hand in his pocket and an expression that looked too pleased, like he had been waiting for this moment. "Elias," Adrian said, voice smooth but sharp. "My office? Now." Elias's stomach tightened. He followed him through the glass hallway, passing coworkers pretending not to watch. His heart beat faster with each step. Adrian opened the door to his large corner office and waited for Elias to enter before closing it gently. Like he wanted the sound of the click to sting. Adrian walked behind the desk, sat down, and leaned back as if he were sitting on a throne. Elias stood across from him, trying to stay calm. "What's this about?" Elias asked. Adrian rested his elbows on the armrests and tapped his fingers together. "I'll make it simple. You've become overrated." Elias blinked, stunned. "What?" "You heard me," Adrian said, shrugging lightly. "My father believed you were the foundation of this place. But I don't see it. I see someone who tries too hard to control everything. Someone who gets too close to the clients. Someone who thinks he's untouchable." Elias felt heat rise in his chest. "If this is about the Blake account, I already fixed." "This isn't about one account," Adrian cut in. "It's about all of them. You walk around like you're the one holding this company up. You're not." Elias opened his mouth, but Adrian raised a hand. "This conversation is a formality," Adrian said. "I'm letting you go." The words slammed into Elias like a punch. "You're firing me?" "Effective immediately," Adrian said, smiling like he enjoyed the taste of the words. "HR will handle the paperwork." 7 years vanished in one sentence. All the late nights, the saved accounts, the loyal clients gone. Adrian didn't offer thanks, didn't offer explanation, didn't even pretend this was professional. The decision was personal, and Elias knew it. He swallowed hard. "What reason are you giving HR? That doesn't concern you." Elias felt something inside him break. But instead of fighting, instead of pleading, he simply nodded. He wasn't going to give Adrian the satisfaction of seeing him fall apart. He left the office feeling hundreds of eyes on him. He went to his desk, grabbed a box, and placed a few belongings inside his notebook. A framed photo with coworkers who wouldn't even meet his eyes now, and a pen he liked. People whispered behind him, some in sympathy, some in fear, some in curiosity. He didn't blame them. Adrian had the power to ruin anyone's career with one impulse. Most people were too scared to even acknowledge Elias as he walked past. He stepped into the elevator one last time. The doors closed and the silence hit him. His heart felt heavy. He tried to swallow the lump in his throat, but it didn't go away. He had worked harder than anyone, given more than anyone, and yet he was leaving like a criminal sneaking out the back door. When he reached the lobby, he forced himself to breathe normally. Outside, rain drizzled over the city, soft but cold. It soaked into his hair and suit, making him shiver. He didn't bother opening his umbrella. Somehow, the rain felt honest. More honest than anything that had happened upstairs. He moved toward the street, unsure what to do next. He had no plan, no backup, no idea how to rebuild from this. The city felt too big, too fast, too uncaring. He pulled out his phone, thinking of calling someone, maybe his brother. Maybe a friend, but he couldn't find the strength to explain what had happened. Then his phone buzzed in his hand. He looked at the screen and froze. Marina Vale, his most important client. The fiercest one. The one who trusted him more than anyone else did. The one he admired and respected more than he ever admitted. The one whose voice he remembered even long after meetings ended. He hesitated, but finally answered, Elias. Marina's voice was soft, concerned, almost trembling. Is everything okay? Adrian just called me. His chest tightened. What did he say? He told me you were gone, she said. He wouldn't explain. He sounded proud of it. Elias closed his eyes. He fired me. There was silence on her end, deep, heavy silence that made Elias picture her face. He could imagine her eyes widening, her brows pulling together, her lips parting in shock. She wasn't the type to hide her emotions, especially when she cared. He fired you, Marina whispered. He fired you. Yes. Another silence followed, but this one felt different, heavier, charged, almost painful. Elias, she said quietly, where are you? Outside the building? Are you alone? Yes. He heard her inhale slowly, as if she were trying to calm down. Listen to me. I want you to meet me tonight. River Street Caf, 7. Marina, please, she said, her voice breaking just a little. I need to see you. He didn't understand why she sounded emotional, but hearing her voice shake made something inside him soften. He hadn't heard anyone sound worried for him in a long time, okay? He said quietly. 7. They hung up and Elias looked up at the sky. The rain continued falling, cool and steady. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting it wash over him. He felt tired but strangely lighter. Losing his job should have crushed him completely. Yet hearing Marina's voice had given him something unexpected, hope. He walked slowly through the streets, trying to make sense of everything. As he passed familiar buildings and crowded intersections, memories of his years at Hale & Co. hit him like waves early mornings. Endless calls, saving account after account. Watching coworkers quit or get fired, feeling unseen by the CEO while being quietly praised by clients. He had carried so much on his shoulders, and for what? To be dismissed by a spoiled, insecure man who couldn't handle being overshadowed. By the time he reached his small apartment, his emotions had twisted into something between exhaustion and anger. He took off his wet clothes, changed, and tried to rest. But his mind wouldn't stop replaying Adrian's voice. Overrated? Too close with the clients, you're nothing without us. Cleus clenched his jaw. The words burned in his memory. He knew Adrian had never liked him. Elias had built strong relationships with clients, while Adrian struggled to maintain even one without help. Adrian had tried to assert control, but most clients came to meetings asking for Elias instead. Maybe that was the real reason he was fired. When the clock approached 7, Elias left his apartment and headed toward River Street. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating soft glimmers of gold, red, and blue. The air smelled of rain and fresh asphalt. He walked faster, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. The cafe stood at the corner, warm light spilling through its windows. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for the heaviness in his chest. He took a breath and walked in. The bell above the door chimed softly. He chose a small table in the corner. His fingers tapped the cup in front of him, though he didn't drink. His heart thudded louder with each passing minute. Then the door chimed again. Marina stepped inside. She shook rain from her hair, scanned the room, and when her eyes found him, Something gentle crossed her face. Her steps were quick but graceful, and when she sat down across from him, he saw emotion swirling behind her usual confidence. "Elias," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of concern and words not yet said. "I'm so sorry," Marina said finally. "You didn't deserve what happened today." Elias looked down. "It's fine." "No," she said firmly, leaning forward. "It's not fine. I've worked with you for 4 years. I know how good you are. You kept my company from collapsing last year. You handled every crisis with calm. You saved deals no one else could save. And Adrian fires you because, what? He's insecure." Elias blinked. Her voice shook with anger and something else he couldn't name. She took a slow breath. "Elias, what are you going to do now?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "Everything feels blank." Marina stared at him like she was seeing every heavy hour he had lived through. Her expression softened and she reached out slightly. "Not." Adrian Hale felt something strange the moment. He stepped out of the morning fog and reached the tall glass doors of Veltrex Dynamics. The sky was pale, the streets quiet, and the building looked colder than usual, as if it already knew what was waiting for him inside. He walked through the entrance with his access card still warm in his hand, but a small, sharp feeling in his chest told him that this day would not be like others. He didn't know how right he was. The elevator ride felt too fast, carrying him to the 10th floor, where the air always smelled like steel and ambition. He stepped out and saw the conference room door slightly open. That alone was unusual. Charlotte Veltrex never left doors open. She believed closed doors meant power. Adrian walked toward it, hearing the faint buzzing of a phone inside. When he pushed the door open at exactly 7:59 a.m., he felt like walking into a storm, even though the room was silent. Charlotte sat at the head of the table, her strong jaw tight, her eyes sharp like she had been waiting for hours just to deliver the blow. Her gray suit looked even more severe today, matching the coldness in her expression. Next to her sat her niece, Leela Veltrex, in a soft beige coat. Scrolling through her phone like this was another boring morning. She didn't even lift her eyes when Adrian stepped in, but for a second. He noticed the shadow of guilt in the way her fingers trembled. He stood still, unsure if they wanted him seated or standing. Charlotte didn't offer clarity. She simply stared at him, her voice cutting through the room. "Adrian," she said, "we need to talk about your behavior yesterday." He blinked slowly, choosing calm. "My behavior?" "You refused to train Lila," she said. "You humiliated her in front of the team." He shook his head. "I corrected her. She was about to mishandle volatile substances. The risk was serious. I did my job." Charlotte leaned forward. "You embarrassed her." Adrian felt a sharp heat rise under his skin, but he spoke in a steady tone. "I prevented an accident. That is my responsibility. I would make the same decision with any trainee." Charlotte's lip curled slightly. "So you're calling my niece incompetent?" It was a trap, and he knew it. "I'm saying she needs proper training. The lab is dangerous." "It isn't a game." Lila shifted in her seat, but kept looking at her phone, though she wasn't scrolling anymore. Adrian could feel her listening. The silence stretched for a moment before Charlotte pushed a folder across the table. "This is your termination notice. Effective immediately." Adrian felt his chest tighten, not because he didn't expect a fight, but because of how fast she delivered it. He hadn't even sat down. He stared at the paper, then back at Charlotte. "For refusing to put my team at risk." "For insubordination," she snapped. "For undermining authority. For refusing to support a member of this family." He exhaled through his nose. "So, it's personal." "Everything in this company is personal," she replied. "You should know that by now." Leela finally looked up. Her eyes met his briefly before she glanced away, her expression unreadable. Adrian's heartbeat slowed as a sudden calm washed over him. This was it. 5 years of hard work, long nights, missed birthdays, meals at his desk, research breakthroughs. Loyalty gone in less than 60 seconds. But even then, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg or explain again. He didn't defend himself to someone who had already made up her mind. He simply nodded once. "If that's your decision," he said, "then I accept it." Charlotte folded her hands like someone victorious. "Security will escort you out after you collect your things." But Adrian didn't wait for security. He walked out without another word, feeling strangely weightless. The hallway looked different now, as if freed from invisible chains. He reached his desk, grabbed the small box already sitting there. Someone must have prepared it earlier, and walked to the elevator with steady steps while people pretended not to stare. The elevator doors closed with a soft metallic whisper. And for the first time in months, he breathed without pressure crushing his ribs. There was anger. Yes. There was sadness too, a dull ache under the calm. But beneath those emotions was something else, something almost like anticipation. Because Charlotte, in her anger and arrogance, had overlooked one very important detail. A detail Adrian had never mentioned. A detail that would break her world in a matter of days. Project Seraphim, the $1.3 billion technology her company depended on, was not hers. It was not Veltrex Dynamics. It was not owned by the board or shareholders. It was legally his. He had allowed the company to license it. Temporary licensing, time limited, signed by Charlotte herself. The same contract she ignored while firing him in her morning rage. Adrian stepped out of the elevator and headed toward the main entrance. The security guard gave him a sympathetic look as he scanned out for the last time. "Rough morning?" he asked gently. Adrian offered a small smile. "Not rough," he said. "Just surprising." He pushed open the glass doors and stepped outside. The cold morning air hit his face like a reset button. The city noise followed, cars rushing by, people walking fast, the world carrying on. For a moment, he just stood there, holding the cardboard box, staring at the building he once loved. Then he turned and walked away. But as he walked, he felt someone watching. And when he glanced over his shoulder, he saw Lila standing inside the lobby, pressed against the glass. Her expression wasn't smug. It wasn't arrogant. It wasn't even proud. She looked hesitant, confused almost. "Sorry." Their eyes met for a brief second before she stepped back and disappeared behind the elevator walls. He kept walking, the cold wind pulling at his coat, the cardboard box light in his hands. He didn't know if Lila felt guilty or embarrassed or simply curious. He didn't know if she would matter in his life after today. But she would. And the truth he carried would matter even more. He took a deep breath and kept moving, heart steady, mind clear. Charlotte thought she had the upper hand. She thought firing him would remind him of his place. She thought losing this job would break him. But she had no idea she had just fired the person holding her empire together. The clock in the city square chimed 8 times, marking the start of the workday for everyone else. For Adrian, it marked freedom. And unknown to Charlotte, the countdown to the company's downfall had silently begun the second. She fired him at 7:59 a.m. He did not smile. He did not gloat. But deep inside, a door had opened. A path stretching ahead where he finally wasn't a background piece in someone else's story. For the first time in years, the story belonged to him. And as he crossed the street, walking toward whatever came next, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope mixed with danger. Fear mixed with excitement, the strange thrill of change. He didn't look back again. He didn't need to, because back inside that cold building, behind closed doors and angry decisions, a storm was starting. And Adrian held quiet, brilliant, underestimated, was the only one who knew how hard it would hit. His life as an employee was over. His life as the owner of a billion-dollar invention was about to begin. And the woman who had just watched him leave would return into his life in ways none of them expected yet. But for now, he walked into the morning with nothing more than a box in his hands and a secret. Worth more than the company that had thrown him out. The day had started with a firing. But it would not end the same way. It would not end weak or broken. It would end with the world shifting, slowly at first, then rapidly as the truth spread. Adrian tightened his grip on the box and kept walking. feeling the first true breath of freedom settle inside him as the sun rose higher, warming his face while the rest of the city rushed forward, unaware of the quiet earthquake that had begun. The future was uncertain, messy, dangerous, but it belonged to him again, and nothing Charlotte did could erase that. The firing at 7:59 a.m. was supposed to hurt him. Instead, it freed him. And somewhere deep inside the locked offices of Valtrex Dynamics, a timer had already started counting down to the moment. Charlotte would realize the greatest mistake she ever made was letting him walk out that door. 2 days had passed since Adrian Hale walked out of Valtrex Dynamics with nothing but a small box and a secret worth more than the company itself. And the world had started to shift in ways Charlotte Valtrex never imagined. Adrian spent the first morning in quiet observation, working from his apartment and letting the news filter in. Reporters were circling the company headquarters, investors were panicking, and the stock price was dropping by the hour. Social media was alive with speculation, rumors, and fear, while the board scrambled to find answers they didn't have. The irony wasn't lost on Adrian. The company had fired him at 7:59 a.m. for refusing to train a careless niece. And now, because of the exact same patent they had ignored, the company was trembling. His Seraphim patent, which he legally owned, had expired in terms of licensing. And overnight, Valtrex Dynamics lost access to the technology that had made it worth billions. It wasn't malicious. It was simply the consequence of a company that didn't pay attention to details. A company that believed it owned brilliance when it only borrowed it. Adrian, sitting in his small office apartment, allowed himself a small smile. The chaos outside didn't scare him. It thrilled him. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't even entirely triumphant yet. He simply felt alive. Alive in the way someone feels when all the weight of expectation suddenly falls away. But as he sipped his coffee, his mind wandered to Leila Valtrex. He hadn't heard from her since their rooftop conversation. She had vanished from the company, and she wasn't answering messages. The thought of her alone, trying to navigate her own guilt and fear, tugged at his heart. Something about her sincerity and vulnerability had stayed with him, burned into his memory in ways he couldn't ignore. The next afternoon, as the city buzzed with the company's collapse, the doorbell rang. Adrian's heart skipped. He wasn't expecting anyone. And yet, standing on his doorstep, small and uncertain, was Lila herself, her hair slightly messy, cheeks pink from the cold, and eyes wide with hesitation. "Hi," she whispered. He stepped aside, silently inviting her in. She crossed the threshold, looking around at the modest apartment, as if measuring it against the vastness of her aunt's empire. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. Adrian closed the door behind her, feeling the warmth of his apartment contrast with the chill she brought in from the streets. "You're safe here," he said gently. She nodded, moving closer, wrapping her arms around herself. "Everything's falling apart. My aunt lost control of the board, the company, and she blames me." Her voice trembled, caught somewhere between fear, shame, and exhaustion. Adrian moved toward her slowly, careful not to startle her. "You are not responsible for her mistakes," he said firmly. She looked at him, her eyes glimmering with a mixture of relief and longing, and whispered, "Then why does it still hurt?" He considered his words carefully. The world outside could burn, investors could panic. Charlotte could scream and threaten and pound the walls of a collapsing empire. But this fragile moment between them was different. He reached for her hand, brushing his fingers against hers softly, and said, "Because you have a good heart, and she never deserved it." Lila's breath caught, and she stepped closer. Close enough for warmth to pass between them without a word. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant hum of the city. For a long moment, they simply stood there, inches apart, feeling something neither had planned, but both were ready to explore. Then she whispered, almost in disbelief, "What happens now?" Adrian thought about the world outside, about the company that had thrown him out, about the patents, the lawyers, the chaos. And he realized that nothing mattered more in that instant than the woman standing in front of him, vulnerable yet brave. "What happens now?" he said, his voice calm but steady. "Is whatever we choose." Lila blinked. her lips parting slightly, her gaze dropping to the floor, unsure how to respond to someone so certain in a world gone mad. She moved a small step closer. "Then choose me," she whispered. His hand found her back, gentle but protective, holding her like she was precious and fragile, and yet something in his hold told her she was safe, wanted and capable of standing in the storm with him. "I already did," he said quietly. A soft laugh, almost relieved, almost nervous, escaped her lips, and she leaned slightly against him, resting her forehead on his chest for a moment, closing her eyes. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, unaware that one of its largest empires had just been reduced to chaos by a man they thought powerless, and a girl who finally began to see the truth. The phone on the small kitchen counter buzzed, but neither of them noticed. Charlotte's voice, emails from investors, messages from board members, all meaningless now. Here in this quiet apartment, nothing mattered more than honesty, trust, and the small but powerful connection forming between them. Adrian led her to the couch, offering her a cup of tea he made quickly, the steam curling between them like a soft barrier against the cold reality outside. Lila accepted it, fingers brushing his again, and for the first time they both laughed softly, a sound that had nothing to do with the chaos outside and everything to do with the relief of finding someone who understood. They talked for hours, not about the company, not about the Seraphim patent, not about Charlotte's fury, but about themselves, about hopes and regrets, small confessions, and quiet stories of childhood, mistakes, and dreams. With every word, the walls between them softened. Lila looked at Adrian with awe and warmth, seeing the man who had been underestimated, dismissed, and fired at 7:59 a.m., yet somehow still standing strong. And it ignited a mix of admiration, attraction, and something deeper she hadn't anticipated. Adrian looked at her, noticing the little things, the curve of her smile when she talked about things she loved, the way her eyes widened in surprise, the subtle tremble in her hands when she was nervous and realized that he had underestimated his own feelings. The company could fall. Charlotte could rage. The world outside could spin into financial disaster. But here, in this quiet, fragile space, they had discovered something unshakable. When the sun began to set, casting a golden light across the apartment, Lila leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder and he rested his chin on her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Words were no longer necessary. They simply existed together, connected by shared vulnerability, quiet understanding, and a new kind of hope. The phone buzzed again, louder this time, and she picked it up reluctantly. Charlotte's name flashed on the screen. Lila hesitated, thumb hovering, caught between fear and the desire to protect this moment. Adrian's hand covered hers softly. "Not yet," he whispered. She nodded, letting the moment last a few more minutes. A few more precious seconds before the storm outside would inevitably reach them. Hours passed, and the golden light faded into soft lamplight. Lila talked about her fears for the company, the uncertainty of her own future. And Adrian listened without judgment, offering support, grounding her, helping her breathe through the tension. Adrian told her small pieces of the truth about the patent, about the licensing terms, without gloating, presenting facts so she could understand the power shift quietly unfolding. Lila's respect for him grew, mixed with something she didn't dare name. A dangerous curiosity and a quiet attraction she couldn't fight. They moved through dinner, conversation, and laughter, learning each other's rhythms. She rested her hand in his, not demanding, not expecting, just seeking comfort and connection, and Adrian felt an unfamiliar warmth, realizing he wanted more than just partnership. He wanted her presence in all parts of his life. By nightfall, the city outside had shifted into darkness, lights twinkling like scattered stars across the skyline, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding below. But inside that small apartment, two lives intersected in a way that felt deliberate, intimate, and dangerous. A connection neither had predicted but both welcomed. Adrian realized that the patent, the company collapse, the chaos, they were only background noise now. Lila had become the center of his attention, and he a center for hers in a way that felt natural, urgent, and impossible to ignore. When she finally prepared to leave, she looked at him with a mix of gratitude, uncertainty, and longing. "I'll figure out what to do tomorrow," she whispered. "But thank you for today, for staying, for letting me be honest." Kezra held her gaze, brushing a strand of hair from her face gently. "You don't need thanks," he said softly. "I just want you safe, and I want to see you again." She smiled faintly, small but meaningful, and stepped back, feeling the warmth of the apartment linger on her even as she prepared to step back into the chaos outside. She left, but the air between them remained charged, quiet yet full of promise. Adrian watched her go, then closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. He knew the storm outside would not wait. Charlotte would rage. The board would demand answers. Investors would panic. Lawyers would prepare documents. Headlines would scream. But Adrian felt calm. He had survived the firing, the betrayal, and the sudden collapse of everything he thought he owned. And now he had Lila human, vulnerable, strong, and real. That was worth more than any patent or billion-dollar innovation. The city hummed beneath him, full of motion and chaos. Yet he felt anchored in a small apartment with a woman who looked at him as if he